Hey, Kids Cook Real Food. Katie Kimball here for the Healthy Parenting Connector, where our goal is to connect you, parents who desperately want to raise healthy kids, with the experts who have the information you need. At Kids Cook Real Food, we're all about building that connection, that confidence, that creativity that kids and families really need to thrive. And today we're talking about something that is a hazard to us thriving, and that's anxiety, and particularly how anxiety can impact your kids' performance academically, whether they're at school, at home, or homeschooling, or whatever crazy thing is going on when this publishes, probably still in the pandemic. I've got MD Dr. Wiggy Saunders here to unpack this with me. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Katie.
So just to introduce you to Dr. Wiggy, as he's called, he's a physician in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and he specializes in hyperthyroidism and other really complex medical conditions. He's board certified in family medicine, but practices integrative medicine, helping thousands of patients regain health through that integrative, holistic approach. And Dr. Wiggy's desire to help people live healthier, fuller lives, just like we do here at Kids Cook Real Food, it's really grounded in his faith. His Christian principles guide every step of his life, his relationship with his wife, Emily, and his kids, to the care and treatment of his patients. And he talks about his favorite biblical scripture, which calls him to daily live his Christian faith by doing all things in love through serving the Lord in his medical practice. And maybe some of you who know your Bible have figured out which scripture it is. It's 1 Corinthians 16 verses 13. Well, not all the way to 24, probably just 13. Be on the alert, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. Let all that you do be done in love. And what a beautiful analogy for integrative medicine, strength and love, right? Both together in your practice, Dr. Wiggy. And you might be wondering, why does Katie Kimball know a random doctor in the Carolinas when I live in Michigan? Because Dr. Wiggy and his wife Emily founded Raise Them Well, which is a company that creates products to help parents like them and myself and you guys live innovative, toxin-free lives, vitamins, minerals, personal care products for kids. So I've been using their products for a really long time, and I talk about them at my blog, Kitchen Stewardship. And I was so excited to tap into Dr. Wiggy's knowledge on the topic of anxiety. So this is great. I'm not anxious at all. But I gotta give a little intro here because we've had experts on anxiety before. So first of all, the basics, right? We know anxiety is affecting both kids and adults at alarming rates. Both, like, we're recording this during the pandemic. It's going nuts right now. Surely after, but already, like even pre-pandemic, 10 million kids in America are clinically depressed or suffering from anxiety. That's a big number. Anecdotally, I know teachers have told me that they've really seen a shift in the last 10 to 20 years where kids feel more helpless and more anxious, even as young as kindergarten. So that's why we keep touching on anxiety here at the Healthy Parenting Connector. We've had therapist Andy Grandy share that 1 in 3 humans, including teens, are dealing with anxiety, and she pins it mostly on technology. So she works to help teens and kids figure out better routines, techniques, and mindsets. Then we had one of my favorite pediatric psychologists, Dr. Roseanne Kapana-Hodge, come on, and she talked about anxiety too. Those increasing demands put on kids and parents, and unfortunately the meds that the kids are being put on instead of learning coping skills, right? So she took those anxiety reducing techniques. We talked about food, and we talked about her favorite supplement, magnesium. So today we get to complete the trifecta, from therapist to psychologist to MD. So Dr. Wiggy and I were diving into anxiety again because we can't give parents enough strategies to help their kids and themselves dig out of our anxious lives. So today we're focusing, like I said, specifically on anxiety and school performance. I think the connection is going to blow your mind. Dr. Wiggy, let's start with something the other experts haven't broken down for us. There are different types of anxiety. Help me out here.
Sure. And thanks for having me, because I think this is very important to be talking about anxiety. What I've seen really over these past couple of months is that, anxiety rates really are skyrocketing. We are seeing so many complications from everything that's happening, but mental illness is taking a huge hit. I'm seeing so many more cases of depression and anxiety. So I think it's really important for us to continue to talk about this, because this is a serious problem, and we're having so many kids with issues with it. But yeah, so breaking down anxiety, how we actually label the different types of anxiety actually doesn't matter a whole lot.
Okay.
There are actually lots of different subcategories of anxiety. I mean, there's tons of them. But I kind of break it down into really kind of severity. There's really kind of three different levels of severity that I kind of consider when I'm looking at a diagnosis. So there is just kind of like situational anxiety, and I think that's what we're going to talk more about today, which is more like school related anxiety, sports related, some situation. And then there is like generalized anxiety disorder, and that's just like you're anxious all the time. And that has different reasons for that. And there's different kind of physiologic reasons for kind of generalized anxiety. And then there's probably more of the extreme option, which is like generalized anxiety with panic attack. And these are those cases where they really can't even function. So they're getting these cases where they're getting this, severe panic, and they're really kind of disabled at that point where they really can't get through the day because the panic is really taking hold of them.
Mm-hmm.
So those are more of the extreme cases. And a lot of times people fall on different areas of that spectrum. But a lot of times it does start with kind of the situational, and then it kind of progresses through to the generalized anxiety with the panic.
Okay, so if we can nip that situational anxiety in the bud and give kids both strategies and like physiological input to reduce the anxiety, we can stop that progression. And I love what I'm pretty sure it was Andy Grandy, the family therapist, defined that situational anxiety as when the situation demands more of you than you have capacity to meet it. And I was like, oh, that's so good and so powerful. So what are some things, Dr. Wiggy, that kids do worry about in school? And I mean, every year, but specifically, we're talking in COVID times now.
Yeah.
What are some worries that are just niggling at kids' brains?
Yeah. And just to go back to that definition, I think that's actually is a very good definition of situational anxiety, and trying to break that down a little bit more, because it does really depend on the capacity to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
So in normal circumstances, or with normal physiology or brain chemistry, they have the capacity to handle it. But when there's too much stress, when there's too much anxiety over an extended period of time, it's too much for most kids to handle. So that capacity issue is important for us to consider. Now, kids, again, so normal things that kids worry about, it's all kids worry about different things with school, especially with academic performance. A lot more worry about their friends and popularity. That's still a major issue.
Oh yeah.
So, but those are like the standard things that normal kids have to deal with just on a regular basis, as well as like parental expectations for how well they do. So those are the standard kind of things that kids are thinking about for anxiety. But now we had on top of that an additional layer with this pandemic. And that's where, again, the capacity is being overloaded, is that there's too many things that are worrisome and that are causing this anxiety. And so when you add in this additional layer, is that I think it's the kids just aren't having the ability to process even the normal stuff anymore, because they're always anxious about this pandemic too. And so it's really kind of a perfect storm for seeing anxiety, and not only in kids. Like I said, we see kids, but we're seeing a ton of this in adults too, from additional anxiety from work, financial stress now, and then the pandemic. And so like I said, it really is they're getting hit from all these different angles at this point.
And circumstances that feel or are well beyond our control, that's even worse, right? For as far as anxiety, when you feel like you literally can't do anything about it.
Absolutely. That definitely increases anxieties when you cannot do anything. And a lot of times that does tend to help with the different coping mechanisms, is control the things that you can. Because there are certain things we can control. We can control our breath. In some ways we can control our thoughts. We can control the food that we eat. There are different things we can control. But yeah, a lot of times there are things that are out of our control, just like the pandemic. And that's where, again, there's really no escape from it, because you cannot control it. And so that is a really challenging thing for kids these days.
Yeah, which means we can't do anything about the situation. We have to raise the capacity, which can be through strategies and techniques, some food like we've talked about, some supplements, literally building your physiological capacity. Before we jump into that though, what about you mentioned adults are under intense stress and reacting with anxiety. How does that affect the kids?
So good question. So like I said, I've seen so much more anxiety and depression in adults than I ever have in my entire practice. So
Mm.
this is above and beyond, like I said, anything that I've ever experienced. And so this anxiety and this stress that parents are perceiving and they're dealing with, that does tend to spill over into the kids.
Yeah.
And that's what's challenging, is because I think they even realize that is that their anxiety is making their kids' anxiety worse. So it is actually an important part when we're trying to fix, kids' anxiety, is also looking at the big picture and
Mhm.
saying, how is the family handling this? How is the family dynamics? What additional stressors are the parents dealing with? Because, like I said, there's that give and take. As the parents feel more anxious, the kids will feel more anxious. As the kids feel more anxious, they'll make the parents more anxious, and
Mhm.
so it does become this vicious cycle, and it does affect each other.
Yeah, I mean, we have to be integrative not only in our own one body, but it's integrative in the
Mhm.
whole family.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, and we're both people of faith here for our family. That's been our place of connection, our groundedness
Hmm.
is there's always something we can do, man. We can always pray. And we
Yeah.
believe that our prayers have a purpose, and we know that we have an end no matter when death comes for us. Our our priest
Yeah.
just this weekend said, in spite of overwhelming evidence to the contrary, people seem to think they can escape death. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Not going to happen. Well, just like you said, it is that element of control. So when we realize that we are not in control and that God's ways are not our ways, that
Hmm.
also tends to help, because then you do you it, a lot of ways faith is an element of growth by surrender. And the more that we can surrender situations, we can surrender anxiety and worries over to Him. That does help. And I think, and a lot of times it is important for the parents to be setting that example for the kids. Is where does your hope come from?
Hmm.
Because if it comes from health, if it comes from finances, or it comes from anything else that, again, a lot of times we cannot control, then that will lead to severe anxiety and accident, and it just tends to get worse over time.
Yeah, and people of all different faiths and no faith are listening. And I think really the key here is however you do it, acknowledging that you aren't in control
Hmm.
is sort of the first step to releasing that control and not letting the lack of control cause the anxiety. So one way to feel a little more in control is that releasing, understanding you're not in control. Another way is
Hmm.
to sort of fill our toolbox with strategies to build our capacity. So what are
Yeah.
some natural ways to help combat attention and anxiety issues? Although I think I just skipped ahead here because we gotta connect it, right? What does
That's
anxiety
right.
have to do with kids' attention and focus and academic performance?
Well, there's always a connection, because the anxiety and focus, but really both of those, they do have a connection with neurotransmitters, with brain chemistry, and a lot of times there is a imbalance in the neurotransmitters, but also does have a bill to do with just the physiologic ability to handle stress, and that is primarily more related to the adrenal glands.
Mm.
So if the adrenals are suppressed, or if they're low and if the neurotransmitters are out of balance, it can present in different ways. So some kids, it presents more with anxiety. Some kids, they just have a more difficult time concentrating, and sometimes it's both. And so a lot of times, again, by fixing those underlying issues, by balancing the brain chemistry, by supporting the adrenals, then a lot of times anxiety will improve. And then if anxiety improves, a lot of times the attention will also improve.
Okay, so oh, excuse me. It's not COVID. I got some lunch in my throat. All right, let me try to break that down a little bit. So
Sure.
I think what you're saying is that stress is going to negatively impact the adrenals, which can result in either anxious feelings or attention issues or both. And I believe your lovely wife told me that attention and anxiety are like in the same sort of location in the brain, taking up the same space, same neurotransmitters.
They can be. They
Okay.
can be. So there's not always a direct correlation with anxiety and attention. They can be, but a lot of times, again, if you think about it, it's really more about an over excitation of the brain and the body.
Hmm.
That's really what anxiety and attention is. And so when the brain is overstimulated, you'll definitely feel more wired and anxious. But it also, when it's overstimulated, you'll have a tough time focusing on a single task.
Sure.
So you do need to calm the brain down. But again, the connection is the adrenals. That's where the overexcitation of the body happens. And the mind-body connection is very real. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot divide the brain and the body. The brain and the body are intimately connected. So when the body feels stressed, when the body feels overly excited, then the brain will oftentimes feel overly excited and vice versa. So you do tend to have to look at the brain and the body when you're trying to control anxiety in particular, but also when you're looking at attention problems. You do generally want to try and calm down the brain, calm down the body.
All right, yeah, that mind body connection is so powerful. And I'm sure every single person listening can think of more than one time when their brain was anxious, was worried, was thinking about things. And yeah, you absolutely can't focus. I mean, I
Yep.
remember when my husband and I were falling in love in college, he would say, I just, I skipped class and I wandered all around campus because my
Mm.
brain didn't work, right? Because he was anxious about, like, is this the person I should spend the rest of my life with? That's kind
Hmm.
of a like silly
That's a
example
sweet
for
story.
what we're dealing with now, but dude, your brain just can shut off when you're feeling anxious or worried.
Yeah.
So what are some natural ways to then combat the negative effects on your adrenals of anxiety and
Hmm.
attention loss?
So yeah, so focusing on adrenals in particular. So the adrenals and just for a background, our adrenal glands are our body's primary fight or flight response
Mm-hmm.
glands. So when one are stressed, it produces the adrenal hormones like adrenaline or epinephrine and norepinephrine, and it also produces cortisol. And then, but when it is under stress, then a lot of times it starts to deplete certain micronutrients. That's kind of the first things that you start to notice when the body's under stress. And the main things that it starts to deplete magnesium, vitamin C, and B vitamins.
Mm-hmm.
That's why when we're trying to support the adrenals, those are the micronutrients that are most important because they're already depleted. And so, especially if you're dealing with kids that have been stressed for a long period of time, the deficiency tends to just get worse.
Okay.
So some people are so deficient in magnesium and so deficient in vitamin C that they can't even tolerate little doses. And so you have to really be careful with how quickly you do it. But a lot of times, again, you have to do it over time too. That's also why a lot of the studies on magnesium and B6 and other vitamins, it takes time
Okay.
because the body is depleted, the cells are depleted, and so you have to start repleting each cell, and that can take up to 3 months
Okay.
before the cells are fully replete. And so then the adrenals are now fully nourished again and they have the capacity to handle stress again. But it does take some time.
Interesting. So I'm hearing you say that stressed out adrenals are like a ravenous teenager, like over consuming your magnesium, your vitamin C, B6. Are these like vitamins and minerals supplements that parents
Hmm.
could just give to any child? And again, you mentioned sort of ramping up, starting small and ramping up.
Yeah.
If I feel like my child is a little stressed out, is it dangerous to give them magnesium or vitamin C without blood testing?
Well, I do generally recommend for anyone that is dealing with any medical conditions to work with their physician. I mean, I think that just
Absolutely.
makes a lot of sense. Now, it can be somewhat challenging finding a doctor that will be willing to work with you that understands these things like
Mhm.
magnesium and B vitamin deficiencies and vitamin C deficiency. So, in a lot of times, we do see parents kind of take these things into their own hands. The good news is these things that we're talking about, magnesium and B vitamins and vitamin C, they're very safe. These are very safe vitamins and minerals, and it's really hard to cause harm from them. I mean, for magnesium, if you get too much magnesium, you tend to get a little bit tired, or you have some diarrhea, so you have some general mild side effects, but nothing generally real concerning. Same with vitamin C. Really, I mean, there's really no major side effects of vitamin C. Vitamin C is water soluble. So if you get too much, you kind of pee it out.
Okay.
Same thing with B vitamins. If you get too much, you pee it out. So it's really pretty safe.
Okay.
But of course, I do have to say, from a medical perspective, it's always best to work with your doctor and discuss with them these different options.
Right. This is not medical advice, just information.
Yep.
And so, but it sounds like the biggest risk is just wasting your budget on,
Yeah.
things that might just go through you. So, like, I love that
Well,
you're
so not necessarily. I mean, it wouldn't be wasted
okay.
because it does. You still use it, but
Okay.
I'm just saying, basically, if you get too much, then that's how your body eliminates it. If you have excess amounts,
Okay.
you'll eliminate it through the urine.
Good deal. I'm such a science geek. I love digging into the science. So, like, what's the mechanism? How does magnesium work to help our bodies?
Well, magnesium is, if you think about magnesium, it's a primary kind of relaxation mineral.
Mhm.
So it does basically turn down overexcitation and overstimulation of certain parts of the body. So it does turn down kind of the neuronal signals in the brain, but also turns off the kind of the signal to the adrenals to keep producing these stress hormones.
Okay.
So it says, okay, we can actually relax for a little bit. So magnesium calms that down. Magnesium also, again, is so many different things that magnesium helps with. Helps with energy production. It helps with digestion. It helps with detoxification. I mean, magnesium is crucial for so many different things. I think there's one study that suggests, I think there's like thousands of different magnesium receptors all over the body in different parts in different organs, different cells. So our entire body needs magnesium. And there also is other studies to suggest that almost all of us are magnesium deficient. You know, I think it's been estimated up to 85% of us, and it's probably even closer to 100% now with the stress and everything. We're probably all magnesium deficient to some degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I know there's like different types of magnesium. I believe
Mm-hmm.
7. Dr. Roseanne has dug into sort of the differences in them. But what would you say for these purposes for attention and reducing anxiety? What type do we want to look for our kids?
So the most important thing when you're trying to find a magnesium is because there are different ones available.
Yeah.
You want to find a magnesium that is highly absorbable. Because if you are just taking a magnesium that is not well absorbed, which still has benefits,
Mm-hmm.
all you're going to get is generally digestive tract benefits. So, like magnesium citrate, magnesium oxide, those are not generally really well absorbed. So they do help with softening bowels because you kind of retain it in your digestive tract. You pull water into there, it helps you eliminate. So
Okay.
you want a highly absorbable form of magnesium, and there are different ones that tend to be better than others. Magnesium malate is a nice option. Magnesium chloride is good, and then like I said, magnesium citrate, it does have some bowel properties, but also does have some decent absorption into the body and into the brain. And so magnesium citrate is kind of it's kind of a standard magnesium because it's decently absorbed, has pretty low side effect profile, does go to the blood through the blood brain barrier, and it's relatively inexpensive, which is a nice option about it.
That is a plus. That is a plus. So, I mean, that's interesting. So, if you're working on like constipation, clearing out the bowels, you want it to be non-absorbable
Not
because
absorbed.
your job is to be like the snowplow. If
Hmm.
you're talking about brain function, you want it to be absorbable so it can like get up there into the brain. Very
Yep.
cool.
Yep.
So, right now, a lot of kids are kind of worried about getting sick. I mean,
Mm.
that's one of I think the concerns that we haven't exactly dialed in on. So,
Yeah.
as an MD, do you have any suggestions for families to help support the immune system, or like some are saying out there, that's just hooey. You can't boost your immune system.
Well, you know, and it is a valid concern, and I do see that from kids and also from adults. And then in some ways, this also goes back to what we were talking about is that you know, if the parents are overly anxious about getting sick, then so will the kids be.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is something we do have to kind of keep in mind. Like I said, this is definitely something we have to take seriously, but being anxious about it is, like I said, it does tend to cause more anxiety for the kids as well. And so, so there are ways that we can boost the immune system. Like I said, that's definitely been established. We know that there are ways that are protective and different things that we can take that helps to support the immune system. So, like I said, that works, and we use this all the time in our practice. So, the most important things for immune support for kids and for adults, there are really 3 or 4 things that I recommend. Vitamin D, vitamin D based on levels. This is well established. This helps with viral things. You know, there's been some studies on vitamin D with the flu, but also some studies on vitamin D with coronavirus
Yep.
that having substantial levels of vitamin D is protective. We always do include vitamin K2 with D. That's just a standard thing that everyone should be doing because it does affect absorption, also does affect with where it's shuttled to.
Nice.
And then the other immune supports, vitamin C, again, not only good for the adrenals, but also good for the immune system.
Mm.
And then zinc. And so vitamin D, C, and zinc, that combination seems to be a good combo for immune support and again for preventive purposes.
The hat trick for boosting the immune system. Now, I understand that you're coming out with a brand new product that
Hmm.
will help us get a good balance of those 3 nutrients.
Yeah, you know what we ran into, and this is a lot of times the way our products develop out of Raise Them Well, is that we see that there's something that could be beneficial, but there's nothing available.
Mm.
So, I mean, really, right now, there's no product, at least that I'm aware of, that includes those four ingredients:
Okay.
vitamin D, vitamin K, vitamin C, and zinc,
Mm-hmm.
and especially not formulated for kids. So there may be something, you know, from a multivitamin perspective or some sort of immune support product. Maybe it has all those things, but it's not targeted for kids. And so, yeah, so we saw this need. You know, right now we're giving, you know, our kids the vitamin C by itself, then we're giving them vitamin D by itself, and then we have zinc by itself. And so it just becomes overwhelming. That's another thing we try to do with Raise Them Well, is we try to make this easy and convenient, and where the kids aren't going to fight you the whole time. So yeah, so that's why we developed our kind of immune support, our children's immunity chewable, and it does have those four ingredients in it, and it's going to be so much easier. It's a chewable tablet, so they also don't have to take any capsules, and it tastes good, so that you're not going to be fighting with them in order to get it down.
Yeah, I hear you, because we've been doing the C and then the D and the K, and sometimes we have combo drops, and sometimes we have
Mm-hmm.
different, and we aren't doing the zinc. So I absolutely appreciate what you do, that it grows out of genuine need, that it's formulated for
Mm-hmm.
children. That is so special and important to us parents out there. And I know my little boys love your Mag Focus, which
Mm.
is, tell us a little bit about that, because that's a chewable. They think it's super
Yep.
fun. When we were doing virtual school, we would start the day with that, because they said, all right,
Yeah.
this is your school day magnesium. They have a different kind that we take at night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what flavor, not flavor, what style of magnesium is Mag Focus?
Yeah. So Mac Focus also came out of a kind of a necessity, where we saw that there was a need for this, and again, it wasn't available. We were looking for things that we could use for attention. Are you still there, Katie?
Oh,
I lost
no.
your signal. Okay,
My
sorry.
teenager set up my camera, and
There
I
you go.
didn't get
Okay,
well trained on how it all worked, but I'm here.
let's just make sure I didn't lose you there.
We're
So
good.
no, so our Mag Focus, yeah, came out of need, that we saw that there's such a need for something to help with primarily attention and focus, because that is, again, that's such a big issue, but it also does help with anxiety as well. And the reason why we used a unique combination of ingredients for Mag Focus is because, again, we also wanted to follow the research. So
Mm.
Mag Focus is a combination of magnesium and vitamin B6.
Oh, okay.
Pretty simple combination. So this is not something, super complicated or super crazy, just magnesium and B6. But what we do know is that there are multiple studies on taking magnesium and vitamin B6 together. If you take those together and you take them over a period of time, attention and concentration problems improve.
Mm.
We also tend to see, and like I said, the connection with that, with the anxiety, it also tends to improve kind of the symptoms of anxiety. It tends to improve irritability, edginess, fidgeting. It tends to also calm them down overall. So anxiety also tends to improve as well.
Mm. What parent does not want that? Right? So Raise Them Well will definitely include links anywhere we share this video. This has been a great amount and great intensity of information, Dr. Wiggy. I always like to leave parents with something super practical that like we can
Mm.
accomplish today with all this information. So what's like the one quick win that you would give parents?
Well, I'll just say that, it's trying to find the balance between what you can control and what you can't control,
Mm.
just like we've been talking about right now. And there are simple things that you can do that won't drive you crazy. And that's kind of what we did with a lot of our products. We wanted to make it simple to do, that is easy to administer, and that is effective. So, getting your child to start taking a chewable tablet, that's pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
Getting them to, work on different cognitive behavioral therapies and breathing techniques and all those other things that are very helpful, that's a little more challenging. So I said, we do want it to be where this is realistic. You can make a difference, and this doesn't have to be really hard, but it does help to do some things that would be helpful given the circumstances. So if they are really anxious or they're having trouble with concentration, they're likely magnesium deficient. So give them some extra magnesium. And a lot of times, again, over time, you'll see that the symptoms improve.
Yeah, perfect and practical. There's dozens of things you can do. So start with the easiest one, like get the
Hmm.
snowball effect going. And once you've got that in place, now you can maybe tackle some of those, yeah, like you said, behavioral therapy. So
Yep. Yep.
goodness, thank you so much, Dr. Wiggy Saunders, co-founder of Raise Them Well. I'm honored to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks for having me.
I'll be back next week with another episode of the Healthy Parenting Connector, where we always build connection, confidence, and creativity in kids. And we connect those parents, you guys out there, to experts who have the information you need to raise healthy children in today's society. Thank you so much for listening in.